Hey guys, welcome to chapter 20. It does feel very random to go from chapter 1 to chapter 20, but they do have to do a lot about sustainability, so they go really well hand in hand. So it does kind of bookend the entire textbook. So let's go ahead and get started with sustainability, economics, and equity. Sustainability, we've been talking a lot, especially in chapter 1, tying with tragedy of the commons and our ecological footprint. One big thing that we want to take into consideration is sustainability really does kind of balance three different needs. Well, of course, when we kind of think of immediately as the environmental needs, we want to think of our planet, we want to think of the resources and the biocapacity of the planet. We want to make sure that we're not over depleting or utilizing whenever we are developing our planet. So that is our environmental consideration that we want to take into mind, I suppose. I don't want to say consideration again. However, the other two factors we want to take into consideration as well when determining sustainability of the future and developing an area sustainably is social factors and economic factors. If I am developing an area, I also want to think about the economy as well. Realistically, I can't just not use any resources and have it be sustainable and have everything replenished. Realistically, the economy's got to work, which means that we're still going to be considering economic factors and putting that into consideration. In addition, society as well, we have to factor that as well. What are the current precepts that are going on in the society, and how can we balance those with the environmental needs and economic needs? So ideally, we would go right in this little middle purple color here that is balancing social and economic and environmental factors and develop in a sustainable way. What we call this is the triple bottom line. The triple bottom line, again, when we're making decision making and whenever we are developing our countries, our nations, or our cities in a sustainable way, we want to take into consideration, again, those economic, environmental, and social factors. Whenever we're making those decisions as well, we can also think about three different worldviews. And individuals are really going to fall into one or two of these, depending on your beliefs, your morals, your values. So whenever we're making decisions, we can have an anthropocentric worldview, you can have a biocentric or an ecocentric worldview. So let's say you're an anthropocentric worldview. Anthro means human. So if you've ever heard of anthropology, not the store, but like the study, anthropology is the study of human societies. Or maybe you've heard of anthropogenic pollution that's coming from humans. So anthro-human centered. So this is the worldview that whenever I'm making decisions, I need to think of humans as number one. No matter what else is going on, I'm taking only human values or human considerations into effect. So it doesn't matter what else is going on. At the bottom line, whatever is best for humans is best in this worldview. Biocentric, we're focusing on that root word bio, meaning living. This is life-centered. So not just humans, but we're thinking of all living things, not the planet. Non-living things will come in just a little bit. But right now, we're just thinking about all living things. So humans are just one of many species. So this worldview says, whenever I'm making decisions and I'm trying to develop in a sustainable way, let's think about all living things. Let's think about the bacteria, the microorganisms, the plants. Let's think about the animals, all of it into consideration in the biocentric worldview. Ecocentric is our last worldview. It's the broadest of the worldviews. Eco meaning life, ecosystem, earth. So this is whenever we're taking equal value in living and non-living things. We're thinking about our ecosystems as a whole, rather than just the living things, rather than just the humans. So we're taking consideration to all things, kind of the big picture whenever we're making those big decisions. So we want to make sure that we're thinking about all those different little associations that occur in the ecosystems when we're making those sustainable thoughts, decisions. Not really a good end to that sentence, sorry. Another thing, again, we've been talking about sustainability. One thing that we want to take into consideration is kind of a big picture view of a less sustainable economy model versus a more sustainable economy model. The big thing that you can probably see right off the bat is the difference in the inputs and the outputs between these two different models. So looking at the less sustainable economy, focusing on those inputs first, I see that there's a great amount of energy being put into the system and a great amount of resource extraction going into the system. After we have those major inputs of energy and resources, I see that we produce goods, we consume goods, and at the end of that, a majority of that then goes into the waste. It goes into that waste stream right after that, which could be good or bad. We'll talk about that in just a little bit, but my outputs are going in, which means that we need, because so much is being thrown away, more resources must go in and more energy must go in. This is our less sustainable economy. However, in a more sustainable economy, what we see is those inputs for energy and resource extraction is much smaller, and our ecosystem services are much bigger. So hold on to that. Why are we able to have such small inputs? Well, it actually comes straight from these outputs. If I look at my outputs, I see that my waste zero is much smaller. We've reduced what's actually going into, or I should say, leaving the system. We're keeping a lot of it in place with the waste within the entire cycle as a whole. So very few of it's actually is leaving. That means a majority of it is actually going back into fueling into the system, waste stream recycling. This could be the traditional recycling you've probably heard of, taking some sort of paper goods, making new paper goods, but it could even be water recycling. A lot of countries, such as not countries, bleh, a lot of maybe countries as well, but I know for sure a lot of countries, I keep saying that, states and cities around America are doing gray water recycling. So gray water is what we call used human water. So the water that you utilize that comes from your washing machine, that's what that's called, the clothes washer. The washing machine, the water that's coming from your toilet, the water that's coming from your shower, all of that is gray water. It's got human particles in it. Yay, gross. But a lot of places, instead of treating that water and then having it go straight into the ocean where you then have to recapture it again, waste stream recycling of gray water actually takes that water and then it says, let's just purify it now and put it right back into the system. So let's purify this water and put it into our drinking fountains. We'll talk about that a lot more when we get to our water resources unit in the second semester. This also means we can invest more in our ecosystem services, and we need less energy and less resource extraction because so much of it is leaving the waste system and going straight into our cycle for production and consumption of goods. We do have a joke to break things up because we're about to switch gears and talk a little bit more about finances and economics. So what did the pirate say when he turned 80? I'm matey. Okay, so we're going to kind of switch gears a little bit and talk about finances of a nation. Before we get into that, though, I wanted to bring one thing to y'all's attention, which is called externalities. Externalities is a vocab word that you absolutely need to know. Externalities essentially is the cost of a good or service that is not included in the economic price. So let's say an example. Let's say that this mouse here, cost, I don't know, $10. I don't remember how much it was. That is the physical monetary price of this good. An externality of the creation of this mouse, though, might be any air pollution that was created whenever we made this good, or it might be any water that was needed during the manufacturing process of that good. So maybe the externality is that a ton of carbon dioxide, literally a metric ton, not like metaphorically a ton, but let's say a metric ton of carbon dioxide was produced in the production of this mouse. That would be an externality. I do not physically pay for it with my wallet. However, I pay for it in other ways. I pay for it morally. I pay for it socially. I pay for it environmentally. So it's kind of an abstract cost rather than a physical monetary cost. Or perhaps in creating this mouse, it required 20 gallons of water to power the machines. So that means that was an externality. Again, I'm not paying for that, but I'm paying for it in other ways. That is now a depletion. That's 20 less gallons that we have available for the rest of our other processes. So again, that is an externality. If we finally made companies responsible for these externalities, maybe there's an externality regulatory committee and that said, okay, Microsoft, you made this mouse. You now have to pay either monetarily for all of this pollution that you've created, or you have to now, I don't know, maybe they have to plant trees to offset the carbon dioxide emissions they made. Then the price of that good would actually increase. All that to say, kind of the big picture thing is that externalities are external costs that are more abstract, such as pollution costs or moral costs or social costs that we don't physically pay for with money. But if companies were held responsible for these externalities, that means the price of the good would increase because the price to manufacture it would increase for the supplier. We can talk more about that, but that's kind of the bread and butter of what's going on with externalities. Okay, talking a little bit about economics as well and talking about finances. If you like business, cool. Maybe you'll really like these slides that are coming up. You've probably heard of a GDP before. Gross domestic product is essentially a way for us to measure the wealth or the value of a country. What we do is we say, okay, here's all the goods that were produced in this area. These are all the services produced in an area, a country usually, in a year. and that's what we call the GDP. A lot of times we utilize the GDP to value, or to measure, I should say, the value or the wealth of the nation, let's say. And the GDP is a very commonly utilized measurement. However, a newer one that's been coming around really the past 10, 15 years or so, that might not be right. It might be a lot longer than that, but it's newer than the GDP, is the GPI. And we like the GPI a lot more. And honestly, I would prefer that we switched more towards the GPI because the genuine progress indicator is a lot more accurate than the GDP. Why? Because not only is it considering all the wealth of the nation and all the goods and services it's producing, but it is also addressing shortcomings of the nation as well by looking at consumption levels, hello America, income distribution, levels of higher education, resource depletion, pollution, and the health of the population. So what we're seeing is actually a more complete picture of the value or the wealth of the nation. We're looking at wealth in a lot of different ways, not just monetary wealth, but also the wealth in terms of the health of your citizen, the wealth in terms of how many resources are you depleting in that area, or how good are you investing in the higher education of your citizens. So the GPI is a much more complete picture. So for example, if we look at America, we've got per capita value in thousands of dollars for the United States. This is kind of an older graphic. I think this is coming from our former textbook, which was from 2011. A little bit older of a graphic. But if we look at the GDP, we might say, oh my gosh, look at America go. We are increasing in wealth. And we are increasing in wealth, especially as you see from the 70s, really until the year 2005 or so, we were skyrocketing. And I don't know what it is currently today. Finances is not my background. Science is my background. However, we do see this increase in wealth in terms of goods and services and resources. However, when we look at the total cost of that, maybe we look into more of those externalities, not so much the money cost, but we're also thinking about, the pollution costs as well, and the social and moral costs. We see that GDP is actually declining a little bit and kind of flatlining in certain areas. So again, that GPI is a genuine progress indicator. How are we progressing as a nation in terms of higher level education, resource depletion, and I can't remember another one. Personal consumption. There we go. Anyways, GPI versus GDP gives us a more complete picture. Okay, this is just cute. Look at this boy. He is a precious little darling. I adore his outfit and his face, and I just thought this picture was so cute. So I had to share with you guys. Okay, we've got a couple more concepts. When we're also thinking about developing nations and developing areas in a sustainable way, we also can think about the practice of micro-lending, practice of loaning small amounts of money to people who intend to start businesses in less developed countries. This is a win-win-win situation. Not only is it, and I bolded this word loan, because this is not, you might think of it as like, oh, like we're giving money to an area, but we're not. It is a loan. And if you think about the definition of a loan is money that you give, but you intend to receive back at a later time. So in microlending, we give a small loan of money to an area, to a small business, and this helps that business get their feet on the ground. Sometimes people just need that little starter money. And once they get that starter money, their business takes off. So this helps our developing countries become more developed. It helps us get environmental benefits as well because we're getting local markets. People are not having to rely so much on importing goods from other areas. Importing, while very good financially for some areas, does cost a lot of fossil fuels. It takes a lot of gas to boat or to bus or to train lots of goods from one place to another. It also helps with education in a lot of areas. And guess what? There's a repayment of the loan. So it helps the lender as well. Makes your heart feel good and you get the money back in the end. But so it is a win-win-win situation. And it does help our areas develop in a more sustainable way over time. We're equally distributing that development around the world rather than some countries developing and some countries being left behind in that area. Oh, it's not too bad. There it goes. Okay. I think we literally have like last 2 or 3 slides. So we are cruising through chapter 20. I'm really trying to just get like the need to know, what is it? TLDR? Yeah, too long, didn't read. Giving you guys the abridged version of this. A couple world agencies you should be familiar with. The biggest one that you really, really need to know is the United Nations. You've probably heard the United Nations. They were formed right after World War II. We needed some peace. We needed some communication between our nations. And so the United Nations formed. After we had the United Nations, all these other organizations formed from that. We talked about the WHO when we talked about Cats of Borneo and the parachuting cats. World Bank is also part of that. We have our environment program. That's, of course, good consideration for our cost. And we also have the United Nations Development Program. And we're going to come back to the UNDP in just a little bit, but you should be aware that the United Nations helps talk about a lot of our worldwide legislation and a lot of our policies, which we will get into later this year. United States agencies that you should be familiar with, first and foremost, is the EPA. In 1969, we had the Santa Barbara oil spill. Santa Barbara is in California. This oil spill, while not like as bad as maybe Deepwater Horizon or the BP oil spills, it was enough to start Earth Day. So this was in 1969. 1970 was the very first Earth Day, April 22nd, 1970. It also began the Environmental Protection Agency. We realized, oh my gosh, the environment is something that we need to regulate. The environment is something that we need to take a stand as a country to help better protect. So the EPA came out of that. Another two organizations you should be familiar with is the Occupational Safety and Health Administration. We're making sure that there's good quality of life for all employees around the Americas, around the United States of America, to be specific, and the Department of Energy. We'll get into that a little bit more as we talk about our renewable versus non-renewable energy sources later on this year. I believe, oh shoot, okay, there is two more slides. I'm so sorry. This is our second to last slide. The United Nations, the UN, established right after World War II. In 2015, they said, hey, in the year 2000, my apologies, this was in the year 2000, and they said by the year 2015. Okay, so they gave themselves a 15-year millennium, right? This happened in the year 2000. Okay, so the United Nations said that these are our goals that we want to get solved by the year 2015. You do not need to know the specifics of them. You just need to know that there was millennium, the year 2000 development goals. You can take a look at these. Some of these we have made a lot of progress with. We have improved child mortality around in certain nations, especially in the United Nations. We have been combating HIV, AIDS, malaria, and other diseases. We have been working towards environmental sustainability. We're far from perfect, but these were at least the goals that we put out in the year 2000 and hope to complete by the year 2015. So you can kind of judge for yourself how well we're doing. But these are works in progress. We still got time to keep working on these. Final slide, a concept that we're going to be coming back to a lot throughout the world. You've probably heard of justice as a term, but we're focusing a little bit on environmental justice. And not only are we thinking about justice for the environment, but we're also thinking about justice for individuals around the entire world, but even in America as well. We're thinking about this inequitable distribution at times of pollution and environmental degradation in particular areas of the world. We're going to talk about this a lot, especially when we get into nuclear waste and water waste as well, that sometimes there's areas that may not have the same rights or may not have the strongest voice as maybe some of us do. And those areas that don't have as strong of a voice, sometimes they end up receiving an unequal amount of pollution and waste, which to me does not seem fair. And so we'll be talking a lot about nuclear waste, and some areas that don't have a voice to defend themselves end up receiving a lot of this nuclear waste. We do have a couple of precepts that are now trying to fight that. I know that there's a movement called NIMBY, not in my backyard, as in if you don't want waste in your backyard, we don't want waste in our backyard. And we are trying to help fight this and make things a little bit more equitable. But know that this is a real thing that we do want to make sure that we're combating to make sure that we are all kind of having this equal share, as we were all equal. We want to be equal human beings on the same planet. I kind of messed up that last end of that, but I hope that you understand what I'm saying. That we do want to try to make sure that our common man, everybody's being taken care of on this one planet. With that, I do have a riddle for you guys. Let's see if you can solve this one. I have cities, but no houses. I have mountains, but no trees. I have water, but no fish. What do you think I am? I want to thank you guys for hanging out there for hopefully this short Edpuzzle. And I hope you guys know that you're wonderful, amazing, and I will see you guys in class. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Take care.